Welcome to this EDUcast, MSP Relevance in a Cloud World. Two presenters today. I'm Gary Audin from Delphi, and I have Ian McCarthy, Director UK for Virsae. What I'd like to point out is MSPs need to create new revenue streams. This means adding better tools to their services and exploring more function they can offer to their customers. This EDUcast provides insights into improved MSP capabilities that can be offered to their customers. As we always do, we have an agenda, and these are the 5 points we're really trying to discuss today. Why the MSPs are in the eye of the storm here, what challenges they're going to face, a suggested MSP approach to dealing with these issues, Virsae's approach and the tools they offer, and opportunities for MSPs that can develop greater revenue streams. So Ian, how has MSP accountability worked in the past before we encountered the pandemic?
Well, historically, I think it was a fairly well-defined area of responsibility. But as we mentioned, we're now in this sort of another phase of the eye of the storm with the pandemic, and that traditionally all they were responsible for as MSPs was the enterprise environment, and you had a number of remote workers working outside of the office, probably a lot less, maybe 20% of that workforce. And really, the MSP and the IT department weren't really responsible for ensuring their overall sort of quality of user experience. I'm sure we've all been on the end of one of those calls with IT as a remote worker, where you're asked to come into the office to have your problem resolved, or to be told, a portion of your home office environment is not the IT areas of responsibility. So pre-pandemic, it was really well defined. The enterprise, the office environment and the connected network was really the responsibility of the MSP.
Now we move into the post-pandemic era. Now that we're emerging from that pandemic, how has the MSP accountability changed?
The key here is, in terms of that responsibility, as I mentioned, is that now we're working, in a hybrid fashion. So that's both from a technology point of view. Technology is now a mix of enterprise delivered solutions and cloud delivered, unified communications and contact center. And as we've seen through many organizations through need and necessity, it's almost proved that actually this remote working capability is successful and can be successful. In many organizations that previously, like contact center, have always felt that you must have all your agents or colleagues based in the office. Actually, they can be as productive, if not more productive, from home. So now the MSP's accountability is stretched, and the lines are a lot more blurred in terms of that accountability. So those remote workers that in the pre-pandemic were outside of the line of accountability have now come inside. So more and more support calls will be generated for users working somewhere other than the office. Could be home, could be a remote location, but those will also now fall firmly into the responsibility of the MSP. And then customers will be looking for MSPs to have answers to those problems. And we've seen from a number of our partners, key questions in RFPs are now, how will you ensure the end user experience when working remotely from the office? So they have to come up with solutions as to how to take care of this new area of responsibility that they've adopted after the pandemic.
Now, this slide shows multiple disconnected tools available to the MSP. How did this come about? And how did this affect and impact the MSPs?
Traditionally, as we know, that because the enterprise solution was probably provided by a single vendor, you could quite easily adopt the vendor's applications or tools to manage the environment. So you'll find that MSPs have sort of developed their own sort of support model to adopt these tools. So if we look here in front of us, you've got manufacturers in the session border controller world, a key part of UC delivery. They'll have their own analytics tools that can help manage their particular products. There'll be other manufacturers and vendors out there that are looking at the cloud-based XCaaS environment. There's some sort of traditional monitoring players, but there's also the vendors themselves, again, looking discreetly at their own environment. And then if we move to sort of typical end user experiences, again, they'll be using the products that they've used before to manage, patch management and things like that on traditional desktops. And as we know, when you're using some form of end user device, whether that be a camera or a headset, there's features and functionality that come with those, but each of them will be specifically looking at their own technology. And previously that may have been fine when they were providing the end-to-end solution, but now things are more hybrid. Maybe that's not fit for purpose.
Now we're still talking about disconnected, but you've gone back and changed what's in each of these color territories. What's happened now? Would you continue with the disconnected approach?
I suppose what we're calling out here is that from those specific vendor applications that they were using to look at their own environments, they're getting a fair amount of data from those pieces of equipment, giving you some information on their performance and health, but actually there's no correlation between them. So, you may find you've got an issue with the SBC. Is that causing the issue of the experience of the end user, or actually is one a knock-on effect to another? So actually, if I was an MSP today, I'd be looking for something that enabled me to harmonize, because I'm going to be getting presented lots of different pieces of information from these vendor tools, and I'm probably not really going to understand exactly where the root cause of my issue is or where to start my investigation.
On the next slide, you propose a cloud approach. What's the value of a cloud approach versus others?
So when we look at that environment that we saw there, the new responsibility of the MSP, what you need to do now, as we spoke about, is capture data from the multiple endpoints that are delivering, information in order for you to try to understand it. So the cloud solution there's sort of a number of key factors, but probably boundaryless is one of them. We as Virsae are able to take data and useful information from the enterprise environment, the XCaaS environment, so the cloud UC and CC platform. We've also got a component that sits on the end user's workstation. So also we capture devices and configuration information from the end user device. So it's boundaryless in terms of our ability to capture data. Because we are manipulating the data in the cloud, we have a fair amount of processing power to use AI and machine learning to stitch those multiple data points together. And because we're cloud delivered, there's an enormous flexibility in the way that we can deploy and manage those hybrid solutions.
Now on this slide, you've added a whole band to the lower portion of the screen here. Contrast the cloud approach to the disconnected approach as we discussed earlier.
So yeah, as I mentioned, for us, if you're an MSP and you need to optimize the way in which you manage your customer's environment, you need to be able to understand what's happening in this new hybrid technology delivery. So some delivery from enterprise and some delivery from cloud, and then also look at that hybrid workforce, so the end user, remote user. What you need to be able to do is understand the end-to-end CX and UX journey, so full stack effectively. So for us, our interpretation of this is that, we've got the technical analytics on the left, which is the information that we're getting from the session border controllers, the SIP connectivity, and coupling that with the XCaaS provider, so information from the cloud application itself, pulling those two pieces together under sort of technical analytics. And then a big part now of the experience that falls in the responsibility of the MSP, as we said, is that work from home environment. So how do you understand where the issues really are? You need to be able to pull that information through from the end user device. So using our Everywhere proxy, we pull that data through, capture that work from home analytics. And then, the final part, if you like, the final foot in that journey is the device that the end user is using to carry the sort of audio or video, depending on how they're managing that interaction. But what's the experience there? So capturing that data from that end user device as well, and creating that end-to-end picture, that full stack in analytics all the way through, using one application rather than multiple applications.
You provide 10 common issues that affect poor quality experience. And I'm sure you could walk into any client and name 10 of those and they would have 6 or 8 of them. What are the top 3 issues you find?
I think that the key we're sort of calling out here, as well as those top 10 issues, is that what we've got on the screen is essentially a typical view from the Teams platform that gives you call quality dashboard. And as we mentioned, the 10 most common issues are not necessarily things that the XCaaS provider generally looks after. Most of these cloud providers, their end-to-end environment is fairly robust. It's sort of on net, if you like. So those common issues that we see on the right are the things that are outside of the span of control of the XCaaS provider. The most common ones, contention for resource, whether that be on your home computer, you've probably got multiple applications running in the background while you're trying to do some form of collaboration call on Teams. The session border controller is probably shared. You've got multiple SIP trunks, multiple users moving through the environment. And then probably lastly is that sort of long period distance to the Teams tenant, which the starting point from that is the end user's workstation connecting to their home Wi-Fi. So contention, probably Wi-Fi, and the long peering are probably the most common ones that we see. But like I say, the key factor is that the 10 most common causes are not really looked at by the provider of the cloud UC and CC applications.
Now, how do cloud-based analytics actually work?
We're trying to look at it from a perspective of the MSP is now responsible for all the way down to the home workers or remote workers environment. And we've used a common code set that we have for our application where we would use it normally to monitor things like Windows servers. But what we do is then look at the performance of the end user's desktop. So for us, that's kind of that work from home analytics, but simple things, Ethernet speed, network, Bluetooth connectivity, what's the Wi-Fi performance between the end user's desktop and his router. So trying to pull together that information, that the area of the conflict. Then looking at the end user device in terms of the camera or the headset they're using for audio, what's happening there? Have we got background noise that's taking effect? Is the user at home constantly answering the call with the boom in the wrong position? So again, trying to understand, if you've got end customers that are complaining of poor experience, then when they're speaking to an agent who's at home, is it actually an issue with the device? Is it a user problem? So trying to understand that. And then lastly, obviously all of these home workers are using an application on their desktop that's talking all the way back to some form of application delivered in the cloud. And then we effectively take a measurement of performance from the end environment all the way back to the cloud. So we can hopefully see where the performance is degrading and give MSPs and their engineers some idea of where to start their investigation.
The word you haven't used is the word global. And it appears to me that you're giving us a global view rather than an element view, which people have been used to in the past. Is that correct?
It is. The way that, because our cloud application is effectively a single application, but with multiple data points across the globe, we're able to drive or derive some fairly intelligent analytics. So some common problems, if you like, in terms of those environments, some common sources of problems. So we tend to release periodically some global analysis that we do. And we had quite a lot of that during the pandemic, where we saw excess utilization or excess wastage. So yes, because it's cloud-based, it gives us the ability to correlate multiple data analytics rather than looking locally at a discrete customer.
Now, I'm an MSP, and what's important to me is the feedback I get from the cloud. Would you talk about that?
Sure. So here on the screen, we're using a sort of typical example of a Teams call, but this could be true in any cloud platform that has almost like a customer satisfaction survey at the end of the call. But the example we've got here is that, as you know, you may finish a collaboration call on Teams. At the end of that call, it will ask you how your experience was. The user then gets to fill out a simple form that's displayed in the middle there. You can grade that from 1 to 5, and you can give some indication of what that experience was when you go back, and that message will then go back to the Teams environment. What we'll do, using some of that sort of intelligence I mentioned earlier, is we'll attach the feedback from the survey and then populate our technical data into a simple to view panel. So it'll start to give the end users or the MSP's NOC engineer an insight as to where the issue may be. So as I mentioned, those component parts, is it an issue with the configuration of the desktop itself? Is it an issue with the connection back to the to the cloud? Is there an issue in terms of jitter packet loss latency? Is it a problem with the headset? Are they using a software version or a firmware version on the headset that's out of date and's got a known bug? And then lastly, I think if you build out, we'll also be looking at the SIP traces to understand what we're doing. So for us, this is really closing the loop. Normally, you know, we've all been there whereby you fill out a survey, you may say your experience is poor, but nothing really happens. What we're going to do is automatically capture your experience with the technical experience and provide that to the engineering function. And another clever factor that we'll also do is we all know that sometimes, unfortunately, you get used to your experience. So you may continually start to score your experience as a 5, even though that technically we can see that that shouldn't actually be true because we can see some issues. So we'll also proactively get that information to the engineering community, and they can proactively contact you and identify, you know, you appear to be having a good experience according to your survey, but actually we believe you've got some technical problems. So looking at it from two ends, but closing that feedback loop for the end user and really getting to the heart of their challenges and improving their experience.
There are multiple elements offered by the cloud. What are the main elements and for what products and services?
So people who are familiar with the Virsae service management tool and application will be considering, you know, are you able to provide some of your traditional capability for that you perhaps have done before for enterprise across some of the new cloud players? So traditionally, we've been able to interrogate and analyze, you know, up to 100 vendors, but listed here are some of the core cloud players that we're now seeing in the market. And the key factor is for us, you know, our ability will be the same as it is today. So playing on that ability to provide real-time health in the form of dashboards, so visually able to see what's happening in the environment. Using our AI and machine learning will proactively alert you on those issues and notify the NOC and integrate into the ITSM tool to provide information. A key part of understanding these new cloud platforms, especially if you've invested in them as an end customer, is what the adoption has been. You know, are they using the applications that you've deployed? And then from a compliance point of view, you know, how are people interacting and what data are they sharing? And does that offer any kind of governance concern? And then a key part of what we've always provided as part of our ITIL alignment is configuration and capacity data. So how much or how little of your resources are you using? Could be licenses, could be your SIP trunks. And is it configured effectively? You know, have you got configuration problems that are causing the issue? So, and then lastly, that quality management experience, as we mentioned there on that example with the team's feedback loop. So looking at the experience, whether that be video, audio, screen share, whatever that may be. So I suppose the key here is that the application that Virsae are delivering for cloud applications will be no different to our application that we provide to enterprise, but we're providing all of the key data that's important to the MSP and ultimately their end customers.
I'm an MSP. I want more revenue. How does Virsae Service Management produce higher MSP revenue?
I think the key on this particular point is that differentiation now over and above cloud delivered solutions is key for an MSP. You know, what makes your delivery of Teams or RingCentral or Genesys different to the competition? The cloud is delivered by the vendor. How do you increase your differentiation and increase your revenue? We believe that extending out into that remote worker environment, the worker working from anywhere, that's the bit that really is sort of the unmanaged. And managing that and providing a solution to that is the part that's going to help MSPs drive up revenue and differentiate. So being able to bolt on value-added services for us is where we believe MSPs will be successful.
You have a commercial offer here. Would you go through it for us?
Sure. The MSP themselves, there's always a cost of doing business. You know, they need to and are expected to provide a fairly robust service just as part of their offer. So, you know, 4 nines availability or whatever that may be. We understand that. And so we have an offer that we call Virsae Event Management. So it's a sort of low cost capability that just enables the MSP to manage the core part of the solution that they're perhaps responsible for. So SIP and SBC connectivity, and it's almost like a cost of doing business. So it's enabling them to manage their environment. The next portion is attaching that data to the intelligence that you can get from the cloud provider. Some useful information from a technical analytics point of view for fault finding, but also that will be where lots of the good data around adoption and usage and things are found. So we'll be helping the MSPs analyze the data from the cloud, so drawing that piece in, so rounding out that technical analytics. And then the last piece we've combined together because we believe they are intrinsically linked, that work from home and room analytics, reaching all the way out into the end user, the community, managing that unmanaged environment. You know, it could be a BYO device, bring your own device. It could be a corporate provided desktop, but essentially it's not within the enterprise. So again, we believe that that's that value added piece. So pulling that sort of work from home and technical room analytics piece together under one umbrella, we believe will really help the MSPs differentiate themselves.
I hope you have enjoyed and learned from this EDUcast. If you want to contact Virsae, visit their website, and this is your email address. Contact information at the bottom. Also, I might point out that Virsae has a library of videos and EDUcasts covering their products that are on their site and I'd like you to take a look at them. We thank you very much for listening to this EDUcast and hope you view them in the future. Thank you.